Hello everyone, and welcome to another video about some of the ins and outs of Toon Boom Harmony. And today we are going to discuss a little bit of the difference between the pencil and the brush tool, because on face value these things can do almost exactly the same thing. And in recent versions of Harmony, so right now at the time of recording we're on Harmony 20, but in the past few versions the brush has developed, so it's almost come in line with some of the stuff that you always used to use the pencil for. Now I'm going to give you a few reasons why I would still use the pencil and when to use the brush and why it's so powerful, but to use it with caution, just because it's one of those things where it can get a little bit heavy and you can get carried away with it. So I'm going to hide me for the time being so you can see my screen. Okay, so let's get to it. So I've got a little demo drawing here, and I'm just going to zoom in. Great game, by the way. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm just going to give myself a bit of space around here. Now, this was drawn, the outline was drawn with the pencil tool, whereas this little shading was drawn with the brush tool. And that would be the main reason to use the brush. The brush is better for that texture finish. The pencil has the option as well, but the brush is way more powerful. I'll just show you now. So anybody who's new to the software, this is going to be really useful. If you click the pencil tool and have your tool properties open, because the tool properties changes according to whatever tool you have selected. It's context sensitive is the fancy word for it. So you'll see it change ever so slightly when I click the brush, ever so slightly when I click the eraser, and the same again for the text tool and so on. So the tool properties panel is very important to be aware of. You kind of want that open most of the time. You definitely want it added to one of these options. If you don't have it visible, hit the plus icon and you can choose what you add from this drop down. That was slightly off screen, but you'll know what it is when you click it. So you can see the pencil tool. We've got some presets in here. And we have this little arrow to the right of the sort of the preview stroke. If you click that, it will bring up a pop-up here, which gives you some tabs which you can go through. I've actually not got any textures loaded in here, but you get some defaults in there, and you can also import or have a new texture and so on. And they're just working off black and white with the grayscale as kind of like the texture itself. Now, there's not a lot of options here for the pencil. There's basically maximum size, minimum size. That's according to pressure sensitivity. So even if I was to do the lightest touch, it will still give me a 25% size width. So if it's a size 10, it'll be a 2.5% is the 2.5 size is the smallest I can go. And you can play around with this. Center line smoothing, that's basically how much it will smooth things out, combined with the contour smoothing. That's a little bit more advanced, but that's maybe for later on. So we've got a few options in there, and we click the brush tool and you can see the presets are just a lot more varied. We're getting much more kind of painterly brushes. If you click this big arrow next to it, now you can see we've got some real options here, and this one is set to textured vector. So by default these solid brushes are solid vector. This is always the thing that the brush used to kind of be, but this new textured vector, the engine's been massively improved. So when you switch something to that, you have all these other options available. You see in here, I can't use dual tip, I can't use paper texture, transparency. They don't apply on the vector, the solid one. Textured vector, however, unlocks them all, and I can use them and combine them. Now at any point, if you want to save a brush, you can just click this little refresh button here. This one will kind of like update the current brush in the palette, and the little plus will add you a new one, so you can call it whatever you want, so you can build your own custom brush palette. We're not going to go into customizing those too much. You can play around with those. It might be for a later video, but for now I want to show you the main differences. So I'm going to hold down the letter O, because that's the shortcut to resize on the fly the stroke. So you see how this, let's just go for 10, because that's a bit of not been messed around with. And I'm going to do the same with this pencil one. So they basically look the same. It's a little bit, just trying to get the same sort of thickness. There we go. Now there's a shortcut, which is K, the letter K. for keyframe. And if I press K, it toggles on the strokes. Now the strokes are kind of the invisible line in Harmony. So they're the thing that the software uses to calculate the actual, the thing that you see. Because a stroke, I'll just show you now. There's a stroke, but if I press K, because it's showing it at the moment, which is only viewed by the software, if I press K, you can't see it, it disappears. So without the software doing its job on the stroke, you wouldn't see anything. Now the stroke is different on both of these. Remember, the bottom one is the pencil. I'm going to kind of write that down so we know. Very chunky writing from me there. And the top one is the brush. Now you might be able to tell the difference already between these two, but again, when we turn off the strokes we can't really tell. The main thing is in the middle we have these points, so we can pull the pencil stroke around with this this kind of center line, whereas the stroke on the brush goes all the way around it, kind of like you've painted with a big fat paintbrush. It's a lot more, takes a bit more crafting to get something out of it. Now that doesn't mean you can't get that thickness and thin that you can get with the brush on the pencil line. Let me show you now. So if we long click on the white contour arrow and go to the pencil editor, this will allow us to add some thinness and thickness to the pencil line. So then if I go back to the contour editor, so again long click on that contour editor, you see how these points are still there. So this is a really nice way of quickly editing. You can delete them as well by just clicking on them and pressing delete. You can edit the stroke. Now you can do that now in the brush as well. If you long click on this white contour arrow and go to the center line editor, it will create a center line here. Now you can see how it's just not quite as robust. You can delete the points, just go easy. I've got a funny feeling I'll crash my computer if I do this too much. If you delete too many of them and you haven't saved, or if they get too close together, you see how it pinches like this. And then you've got, like when you go back to the contour editor, you've got things to mess around with, to adjust. So it's a little bit more like, I wouldn't use that, like a pencil, because it's going to create more problems than it's probably worth if it's an outline. So just use it sparingly. So the brush can obviously do that really cool thing with the texture. Just be aware, you can't just replace the pencil line with something like this, because when we look at the stroke, you see how the stroke goes around the outside. So it's kind of like it's fading it to the edge. Yeah. So that means that if you were to fill up to this, and I'm going to create a nice little area for us to fill now with the stroke. So the stroke tool, which is a sub selection, a click and hold on the paint bucket, that literally allows you to draw those invisible strokes. And now if I get the paint and fill it, you see how it's filling up to that point there, yeah, that edge. So it's not quite as useful as you might think initially. You might think, oh, it's really cool, now I can paint with texture. No, it doesn't know where to do that. Whereas on the pencil line, it will fill it up to this point. So let me just show you with the stroke here. If I was to draw this and then fill this, if I delete this pencil line, you see how it's gone up to there? So that's the thing that is the kind of the power of the pencil line, is it is neater for doing outlines. Now, why have I told you all this? Well, it's exactly like I was saying. You want to know the differences, because let's just zoom straight back out. When you're doing a drawing like this, which I've drawn up, if I go into my drawing itself, I did a rough first of all in this color. I'll just make it a touch darker so you can see. So I did a rough first, and then I lightened it, and then I did a clean line. And you can use these art layers as you want. Again, that's for another video, but you can see all the strokes I've created there. I've created a stroke along the bottom to contain the fill. Then I painted some textures in, and then I just put some trendy 80s patterns on there. So that's how I got what I needed out of it, and I've got a nice clean outline with a few brush things in there that are more painterly, and now I will fill the main block areas with colour. So that's the main difference between the pencil and the brush. Generally, you're going to use the pencil for the outlines and the brushes for the fills. You can paint fills in if you need to, or if there's any gaps, or if you've got a more hand-drawn feel or a painterly feel, you could experiment with those vector texture brushes and paint it all by hand. I hope that's been useful to you, and I hope it demystifies the differences between those two key tools.